Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak to the motion moved by the member for Kooyong and recognise other contributions to this debate. As someone who worked in and around government for 20 years, I recognise the member's advocacy for more transparency in government and in principle support much of the thrust of this motion. It is critical, though, to acknowledge that this government has already made significant changes, including the establishment of a National Anti-Corruption Commission and the introduction of overdue reforms to public interest disclosures, with more reform on its way. We have strengthened codes of conduct that apply to ministers and their officers. It's a stark contrast, Deputy Speaker, to the previous government. The Albanese government is committed to upholding a high standard of integrity, transparency and accountability, a standard the former government never aspired to, let alone achieved. Indeed, Deputy Speaker, as previous speakers have noted, the original lobbying code of conduct was created by the last Labor government. When the code was established for the first time, lobbyists were required to register their activity and comply with strict rules on transparency. It was one of the many integrity measures introduced by the Rudd Labor government, which included a new code of conduct for ministerial staff and a strengthened ministerial code. Deputy Speaker, when a third-party lobbyist contacts a government representative, including a minister, the code requires they confirm they are on the register and disclose whose interests they are representing. The code is practical, making it easier to adhere to and therefore more effective. The code also imposes an obligation on government representatives. They must not knowingly be a party to lobbying by a third-party lobbyist not on the register. There are penalties associated with the failure to comply with the code, including a power for the Secretary of the Attorney-General's Department to bar a lobbyist who has committed a serious breach. The current code recognises the rights of lobbyists to lobby, but places conditions on the manner of third-party lobbying through mandatory registration and disclosure obligations. Deputy Speaker, I acknowledge that not everyone is happy with the scope of the lobbying code, and the argument that the scope of the existing register should extend to in-house lobbyists in particular. I think there's merit in considering this approach. Indeed, some might suggest it's a way of closing a loophole. Deputy Speaker, I recognise that this motion also calls for the automatic access to ministerial diaries. Such access to diaries would be unknown to the Commonwealth's Freedom of Information system as it currently stands, as it does not provide for the automatic publication of any category of document. Access to official documents of government are available under the Freedom of Information Act by request. Each request is subject to assessment, which is governed by statutory requirements. It's governed by a series of exemptions, each of which needs to be considered. But it is critical that these requests should occur in a timely way, and I acknowledge the concerns around timeliness often. I note also the motion's suggestion to extend the post-employment cooling-off period for ministers and senior government officials to 3 years. From my experience working with government prior to politics, I agreed that we do need to obtain the right balance between post-political careers and public responsibility. For example, Canada has had a lobbying act that prohibits not only ministers but also their staff and senior public servants from undertaking a broad range of activities for 5 years after they've left office. This includes communicating with any public office holder or senior public servant in relation to their official duties and arranging for other people to do so. This is a much stronger approach than the current Australian approach, with some of the gaps that still remain in our system, including a time period that can sometimes be avoided by warehousing ex-officials on other duties. Deputy Speaker, looking around the world at the state many great democracies find themselves in, and contemplating the challenges for our country that loom on the horizon and creep ever closer to us, there are few tasks more important than restoring trust in and capacity of government. The Albanese government is committed to integrity, honesty and accountability in government. Within months of coming to office, we established the National Anti-Corruption Commission, the single biggest reform to the integrity framework in decades. The Commission commenced operations on 1 July 2023, a major reform of the current Labor government. Deputy Speaker, this government, like the member for Kooyong, was elected to make our government and public service more transparent, more accountable and strengthen its integrity. We've already made significant progress, but we recognise that there is still more work to do.